Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Take Flight Podcast, which is episode number 219, with your four hosts, Daniel Johnson, Oluokanola, Pabilo Timbo, and I, Shuel Ahmed. Now, from the title, we are back already in the new year with a very exciting Take Flight Talks interview episode where we interview thought leaders and trailblazers, sharing with us their journey and expertise on how they've been able to take flight in their respective arena. Now, in case you've missed any of our previous Take Flight Talks interview episodes, where have you been? Please make sure to check them out. We've interviewed senior leaders from various industries, from real estate to non-profits to healthcare to music. So make sure to please check them out. Our list of interviews continues to grow. So please make sure to check them out if you haven't done so already. But now to today's episode is an inspiring leader with a proven track record in the non-profit and for-profit space. This week's distinguished guest is Nathalie Richards, who is the Chief Executive Officer of SEO London. Now, Nathalie in her CEO role connects corporates with talented students and business professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. She is also very passionate about supporting schools and also intervention tracking and helping schools to find specialist support and life-changing activities for students aged 5 to 19. Now, on top of this, Nathalie is also a trustee at Virgin Unite, which is the charity arm of the Virgin Group and the Richard Branson family. And as well as that, she's an accomplished speaker and panelist with numerous radio and media interviews, which is why we're so excited to have her on the show today. She's as well as that multi-award winner in various areas, from the Department of Education Award for Innovation to venture opportunities and tech challenges. So really wide variety of awards across the board. And as well as this, she's been able to complement her professional experiences with an Insead MBA and 10 years of a great track record across IT, project management, and consulting. Now, if that isn't already exceptional track record, she's also fluent in French and Italian. So hopefully we can test some of that in today's episode. Now, in this episode, we'll be deep diving into Nathalie's journey from her younger years to becoming a CEO today, her why for the activities that she leads, and also any tips and recommendations for all you, our flyers out there looking to take flight. Now, let's get started with this exciting episode and hit the music. Take off, take flight with you. We never fly, but we're flying. Now, hi, Nathalie. Welcome to Take Flight Podcast. We are all very excited to have you on. But first question, most important question, how are you doing today?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for such a flattering summary there and an introduction. I'm very well indeed. I'm sitting here in a deserted office. We're based just around the corner from London Bridge, but it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very, very excited about the conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Fantastic. Why don't I kick it off, I guess? Thank you again for being on the show. I think Shuel gave a great overview of your career, but whenever we start with a guest, we try to take a step back and look at your younger days. So who is Nathalie? What does the younger version of you look like? How did you grow up? Who inspired you, motivated you to who you are today? Why don't you take us on that journey, starting from the younger version?
Oh, right back to the origin story, as they call it these days.
Yes.
Yes. So, I grew up in Ilford, and for those of you who don't know Ilford by reputation, and sadly many do, lots of news stories about the goings on in Ilford, but it's where the East End meets Essex, and I grew up in a relatively modest home to Caribbean parents. My mum's from Guyana, my dad's from St Kitts and Nevis. So I grew up in the 80s, and when I think about the progress, fortunately, that we've made since, it wasn't unusual for people to be hurling racist abuse at you, or it was a different time. It was before Stephen Lawrence was killed. So there were challenges, there were opportunities as well. I was fortunate enough to pass the 11 plus, and I went to a grammar school, which was a girls' grammar school. And it wasn't the most diverse of areas, and there was quite a small proportion of people from an African Caribbean background. So I was quite used to always being the only one throughout a lot of my schooling. And I find that that's often a theme that resonates, particularly with the work that we do, that people are often going into environments where they're the only one. And you know, I had opportunities, but then some of those opportunities were limited as well. To a certain extent, I think a lot of the talents that I later realized I had were not realized in school. And often you do get some teachers that have lower expectations of you, perhaps, or don't see your potential. And I think that was especially the case then. I think even with the work that we do, and that I've been doing, I find that's still the case. Sometimes the limited expectations of teachers can put students on a certain path. But I was also always fascinated by the idea of going to university and being able to break out of Ilford. The world was a big place, had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do something quite special in future. And that's where I was incredibly fortunate to be part of a program that resembles what we do at SEO in many respects, called the Windsor Fellowship. Windsor after the House of Windsor. So Prince Charles, the then Prince Charles, was the patron of the organisation, that was looking for young people from ethnic minority backgrounds who might not have the understanding of the variety of different roles and career paths out there, who had perhaps potential, but needed the networks, the self-belief, the understanding of the interview processes, and also just to believe that they could make it by connecting them with role models. And I was fortunate to get onto this program. And that's where my story really begins, because then by this point, I was in my first year at Leicester University. I was able to go on a variety of different boot camps and training programs that really opened my eyes and kind of set me on a good path in terms of my career. So yeah, from humble beginnings in the East End of London to what would end up being quite an international and vibrant career.
Nice. And you mentioned around the Windsor Fellowship. How did it find you? How did you find it? Because that would be quite interesting to find out that background.
Yeah, so no, great question. And it was just super random. My mum saw a notice board somewhere and just, said, are you a talented young person from an ethnic minority background? Would you like to discover, different career paths and opportunities that await? And she gave me this crumpled bit of paper, and I called the number, and before I knew it, I had an interview and was very fortunate to be able to secure a place. So the answer is super randomly. And my mum hadn't walked past that notice board. Who knows, my life could be in a very, very different place now. And that's one of the things that when I then went on to found a social enterprise years later, kind of fast forwarding a little bit in my story, that felt so important to me. It shouldn't be random to find these types of opportunities. Is there a more structured way of being able to allow young people with ambition, but who need that extra support to be able to access it? But yeah,
totally agree.
Back then it was very, very random.
Very random. Gotta love our parents for that. No,
Exactly. Yeah.
you, no matter what.
Because she saw the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Natalie, for getting us up to speed regarding your younger years. And I think you alluded to it just now, but accelerating a few years, how has your journey been post-graduation and in your professional career to becoming a multifaceted leader today?
Oh, multifaceted. Well, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. Yeah, so at university, I did a gap year to explain the speaking. I didn't speak French back when I was growing up in the East End of London, but fortunately, I was part of the Erasmus program, learned to speak French fluently, had 2 internships at the Bank of England, so had worked in the city and had a reasonably good understanding of lots of different career paths, knew what consulting was. Or broadly speaking, and applied to Accenture, so the management consulting firm, and started a career there. When you think about the transition, having done an economics and law degree at the University of Leicester, and having, with the language skills and also having done those 2 internships in finance, really thought that I'd be working in a really glamorous role in finance. Perhaps I'd be at the London Stock Exchange, I'd be in investment banking, and I was really excited about what I was going to do next, and sat down with the HR manager over at Accenture, and then she said, so your first project is going to be in Staines, So I don't know if
the reaction tells you.
Yeah, we know what that is.
Oh, no disrespect for any of our listeners that are maybe listening to this.
From
It's
Staines,
just
yeah.
it was just a delivery of the story. That's why we were laughing.
Absolutely, it definitely. It's fair to say it's not the most glamorous of locations. So popularized, of course, by Ali G at that time, which was the only reason people really knew that Staines existed. And never met him though. And so I and then said, okay, so what am I going to be doing? And I was testing billing interfaces for British Gas, and I thought, okay, right. It took a little while to process it, but then so give it a try, see how you get on. And that was actually fantastic advice, because I learned so much about technology, about project management, about how these programs and opportunities are structured. And so even though my first instinct was sort of, you what? Going for it was actually such a good opportunity to learn and to grow. And I moved quite quickly up through the ranks. And my next project actually was in Paris. And by this point, I moved across to a role at BP, where I was the only member of the team on site. And at this point, I was still, less than a year into starting my career, and I was now representing Accenture on sites as they needed somebody who could speak French, who understood the French system, and there I was, and that's when I got my first promotion. It was just great to take advantage of the opportunity to have got that understanding of how to make a tech implementation happen, kind of a large scale implementation, to take that skill set to another client in another country quite quickly. That was pretty exhilarating. So, I'm giving you the potted highlights. Of course, there are always challenges along the way. And particularly when, when I got to the project at British Gas in Staines, which was part of the Centrica group, I was the only Black person on site, and actually within the team, the only woman. So there were a good 30, 40 on the team, and I was the only woman when I joined. And so, it was not the most diverse of environments, and that came with some of its challenges, but it was also a really great opportunity to learn, and also importantly, to learn how to navigate those spaces where you are maybe the only one, where, you have to, you really have to use all of your savvy to be able to navigate the system and succeed and thrive in it. So yeah, I learned a lot.
Talking about that, sorry, just to chime in, how did you digging into that? Because I think all of us probably have experienced that in this podcast, where you've walked in the room, you're either the only Black person, like you mentioned, Black female also in that room. How did you navigate that? How did it feel, especially coming from where we come from? And then stepping into that room.
Interestingly, and I know, everybody will have a different experience. As I said, in the area that I grew up in, particularly in my schooling, I was always the only Black girl in my class. The only time I actually had another Black student in the same class as me was when I went to university, and sometimes I was the only Black person in my year group. So being the only one was something, certainly from an ethnicity perspective, was something I was quite familiar with, but not, I went to a girls' school. So the idea that I was the only woman on the project was actually the thing that stood out perhaps the most for me in that particular context. But how to navigate it, I mean, it may sound cheesy, but just to really look for the humanity in people, like look for the points of common interest and connection, and build advocates, even if they don't look like you. And sometimes that works because you're in control of that situation, and then sometimes there are instances where things are don't go the way that they should. You're not necessarily treated fairly. There was one particular memory that I have where there was a sort of a rather pompous line manager who didn't give me the appraisal that I certainly felt that I deserved. I could evidence. But I knew one of the partners on the project, and I just, I asked for some time with him and went for a coffee and just said, I just don't think this reflected what I did. I gave very clear examples of what I'd done. And he ummed and ahed at first. And a couple of weeks later, the appraisal was upped quite significantly, which also at the time was a great learning for me, because it meant that, on occasion, if you can stand your ground and do it in the right way with the right advocates supporting you, you can change the outcomes. And I'm not saying that's always appropriate advice, but fortunately I did know this partner who had observed elements of my work and was able to make sure that I was treated fairly in that context. So I'm just saying that I learned both in terms of the skill set, but also in terms of some of the soft skills you need to develop as you want to navigate through your career and make sure you're always fighting your corner appropriately.
And sort of sticking with that sort of theme around navigating, Nathalie, you've built a decorated career in consulting and sort of managerial posts. We are very curious to understand, how did you manage the transition from sort of that managerial positions to the CEO title that you have today? What were some of the sort of early challenges that you experienced, and also some of the positive surprises that you sort of encountered in taking on this position?
And you mean the position at SEO London?
SEO, exactly, yes.
Yeah, so there's another little, there's another piece of the story that kind of connects the two worlds. So yes, I was in the corporate space. I was promoted to manager quite quickly at Accenture, and then I moved on from that and worked at KPMG for a while. So another of the big four consulting and professional services firms. I was fortunate enough to move over to Paris and then worked with an offshoot of one of the KPMG projects I was working on, then got my MBA from Insead. Actually, it's probably worth mentioning that while I was in Insead back in 2008, I had a brief foray into the world of finance, because finance seemed very, I know a couple of you have got finance backgrounds. So I thought, yeah, this sounds really great. I talked about at the beginning of my career, maybe, I really wanted to go into finance. I'd gone into consulting and more on the IT and change management side of things. And I got my opportunity. I did an internship. I got 2 offers for internships. And so in the summer of my MBA, did an internship, and despite, very challenging environment, challenging year, got an offer for a full-time position working in a top trading desk in London. Right. And so the trading desk was at Lehman Brothers. So I'm sure you know how
this is going.
2008.
Yeah.
Ended.
Interesting. Okay.
You turn on the TV and you see your job offer evaporating and taking the global financial markets with it. So that was a real highlight. And then after that, nobody was hiring. So.
And is that actually how you found out? Sort of through the sort of media, news, TV,
through the news,
pretty much.
Yeah. And the interesting thing was, even the week before, I had I'd sent out an email to the cohort of people that I'd been with on the summer, saying, gosh, it's not looking good. The share pricing's plummeting. What's going to happen? Is the bank still going to be around in a week? By that point, I just got my offer. And one of the HR guys was actually copied, and he wrote to everybody and said, I know this is just speculation. The bank is solid. As the chief exec has said, we are robust, and we're just going to look for the merger or the takeover. And less than a week later, everybody, it was quite an interesting summer, actually, just seeing how so many of the leads, and there were some lovely people there, some great people, but they were very much in denial. It came completely out of the blue for them in the end. And of course, subsequently, we've realized some of the cultural practices that maybe contributed to the collapse. But in any case, I was there in the eye of the storm. And then, so I went back to consulting after finishing my MBA at Insead, and then decided to take a complete shift in terms of my career and start up my own social enterprise. And the reason I chose social enterprise was because I wanted to strike out my own as an entrepreneur. I felt the time was now. I felt I'd acquired a range of skills in the corporate world that I wanted to apply in different contexts. And they say, do what you love. And right from the days that I was at the Windsor Fellowship, I had been giving back to young people, some very close in age to me at the time. I was a coach, I was a mentor. I saw myself, I had the opportunity to be a role model for young women who looked like me, who maybe didn't know about these different career paths and options. So I did an awful lot of that, as well as, working with or mentoring and volunteering with organizations like the 100 Black Men of London, Young Enterprise, etc. So when I was looking for what job could I possibly do, what business could I build, what would I be really passionate about, I just thought it's got to be about supporting young people in some way. And where do you find a critical mass of young people? Schools. So I called up some local schools and just said, look, can you just tell me what challenges do you have? Like where are there? I was trying to understand where there might be unmet needs. And this is where the idea for Educate was born. And going back to my experience and my mum walking past that notice board, just felt that what if there could be a virtual notice board where you could find all of the great opportunities available for students? And that's where the very first iteration of Educate was born. But it soon pivoted into a space where what we felt was important was for schools to understand the mental health and wellbeing needs of their students, because if they knew which ones were struggling, whether it's because they had particular difficulties or challenges, or because they had aspirations that weren't being met and they needed to be connected with organizations that would push and challenge them and provide them with opportunities, there was a better means of understanding the needs so schools could connect them with what was out there. So that's what became Educate, and I ran for just under a decade, and then ended up at SEO London. And in terms, just to finish off on your question with a quite a long-winded answer, having built something from scratch to a team of 20, which is where Educate was at the point where I stepped away as chief exec, and I'm now on the board and the team continues to run. I think the SEO London board felt that I brought the blend of corporate experience that I had in my previous life, as well as a desire to have an impact through the role running Educate, which gave me quite a unique insight into those two worlds that I could bring to my role.
Absolutely.
Let me just say, Daniel, let me just jump
so many more questions going to come from, but go ahead.
Jump in,
Daniel, please.
You go. So just a question, and obviously probably being a little not being biased right now, because you have the experience of a non-profit and obviously working for a profit. Which do you enjoy the most? Which aspects do you enjoy the most? Obviously,
you're putting Nathalie in a tough position.
Yeah, this is where we can happily edit this answer out, Nathalie. So
well, I guess, what do you enjoy most about the non-profit side, I guess?
Well, interestingly, I would describe myself as being somebody that loves working in impact-focused organizations. And it's true that many, if not most, of those impact-focused organizations are not-for-profits or charities. But that's not necessarily the case. There's a whole world of social enterprise where actually you can be profit-making, but also have a really robust social impact mission at your core. And so if I had to kind of sort of say what my dream is, or my where I love to operate the most, is actually where there's an organization that is impact focused, but that has a viable and sustainable business model that underpins what they're doing, whether or not it's a for-profit or it's a not-for-profit, as in the case of SEO London. And one of the things I'm really drawn to with my role is that we have such a strong value proposition for our partner firms. So I hope that's an elegant way of
that was an elegant and perfect answer.
It's not an either or, is the point that I'm trying to make. It really is that you can find really great ventures that combine that sustainable, dynamic, entrepreneurial approach with massive social impact. Love it. You don't have to choose.
Amazing answer. So we definitely don't need to edit that one out. So building on that, actually, and I'm just thinking about the story that you've been able to share, and I think that's also one of the big reasons why we wanted to have you on, because you have such a multifaceted background, as Daniel had mentioned, in corporate, in entrepreneurial space, in not-for-profit. I think a common theme that has come out a lot from your story is having that courage to take a jump, and having that courage to take almost the uncharted path. Now, with people coming from underrepresented backgrounds, sometimes you want to take the safest option, because the safest option is guaranteeing safety. And sometimes you want to make that change, but you're hesitant because you understand where your family has come from and you don't want to risk it all, because that feeling of success and failure is almost touching each other. It's very, very close. It's almost on edge with each other. So I think in your career, you've demonstrated that you've had the courage to jump, and it's also worked out. But tell us what the jumping from different subject matters and different opportunities, what's been your thinking behind that, and how has that evolved over time as well?
Yeah, you know what? There hasn't been as structured a game plan as one might think, because some of it has been a little random. If I can be honest about that. I mean, you know, at one point I was thinking of going into finance, and then the bank collapses, and so do the global financial markets. And you have to roll. You have to roll with the punches. I think I'm a big advocate of education, because I do feel that it's something you can always fall back on. So I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial bug, but I wanted to get my degree, and that's not necessarily the case for everybody. I know there's certainly many people who strike out at different points, but you know, my personal advice in order to kind of hedge your bets is if you get that, you know, your education and you get some experience under your belt, then you can experiment and try and see how things go. And if things don't work out, then you can always go back to that. So yeah, I think you need to be a little crazy sometimes to take a leap of faith and give something a go. But if you also see every failure is a lesson, and I know it sounds so cheesy, and people will say, oh yeah, how does that work, you know, I'm worried about this. Well, you know, the lessons that are the best lessons you learn are sometimes the most painful ones. And what I found in my stories, they invariably help me at some other point in my journey where I look back and I think, oh my goodness, that was torture at the time, but actually now I'm dealing with a certain situation much better than I would have done. So I think as long as you know there will be bumps in the road, but you know that you'll learn from them and grow, then, you know, why wouldn't you give something a try? But another thing that I think is really important is having good people around you who can make sure that they're steering you along the way. If they're not readily available to you, seek them out. You know, sometimes you just ring up somebody and say, I'm a huge admirer of yours. I love what you've done in your career. Can I meet you for lunch? Can you give me some advice? And you'd be surprised just how many will actually say yes and give you some really fantastic life-changing advice or some good contacts. So I think be bold, go for it, but be prudent and smart about the decisions you make at the same time.
I like that. Pivoting slightly, Nathalie, we have a strong audience of professionals and entrepreneurs who are looking for trustee, board, and additional leadership opportunities, myself being one of them, actually. How has your experience been in that area? And can you, and at the same thread, can you tell us more about your experience as a trustee with the Virgin Group?
Yes. So first of all, if you are thinking about joining a board as a trustee or a non-executive director, I would say absolutely do it. It's such a great experience. And what it does is to give you another string to your bow, because you can have a parallel career. And as you get, you know, as people start to get older, and you guys are obviously so young and fresh faced, you're probably thinking that's decades away, but it creeps up on you. It's some people start to move towards what they call portfolio careers, where they can be on boards, they're advising boards, and they can even be quite lucrative positions. So anyway, if you're thinking about joining a board, absolutely do it. And in terms of my own personal experience, my first board role was with an organization called Generating Genius. I happened to meet Tony Sewell, who's now Lord Tony Sewell, who was the founder of the organization, and he was looking for board members. At that point, I was pretty young and, you know, a woman that was in a tech career, and he thought that I could bring something quite special to the board. So it can be as fortuitous as a chance meeting. It can be much more concerted than that. But there are so many roles out there that need people with fresh ideas, who can bring something to the board. And often you'll think, oh, I haven't got enough experience, I'll do it at a certain stage of my career. No, you have lived experience, you have opinions, you have a huge amount to bring to the table that perhaps others don't. So I would absolutely advise people just to go for it. And there's lots of organizations out there like Black on Boards, on board or getting on board, a variety of different organizations out there that you can try to get your first board role. Another thing that I would mention, because I'm so passionate about this area, it's your fault, Daniel, for asking me the question.
No, lovely. Good, continue.
Is that what it also does, when you're on a board, you're not operational. You're about ideas, you're about the three S's. So you're about supporting the organization with your skills and your experience. You're about scrutinizing what they do and making sure they have good governance. And you're also about strategy. So thinking about new things that they can be doing to improve their impact or their performance. And it's lovely actually to complement your business skills where you're used to doing things with taking a step back and thinking strategically about how you can support them. So definitely an advocate for that. How did my role come along at Virgin Unite, having done a couple of board roles, including the one at Generating Genius? I was approached by them. They were looking for a new board member. They have a really innovative approach to driving social impact. And I came from a consulting background, and a lot of what they do feels more consultative in terms of the way that they support and incubate the organizations and the projects that they support. And so it was just really good timing. Look, I know it's a fantastic name. I was quite aware of that to have on my CV, but you give up quite a lot of time and energy when you have a board role. So I wasn't going to take the role for that, but I really liked the way that they operated, and importantly, the types of ventures that they supported and types of work they got involved in. So, for example, Richard is very passionate about ending the death penalty, which I'm also, and that's not as popular an initiative as some of the other initiatives that philanthropists will support, but that's something that he feels very passionate about, and criminal justice reform generally, which is also a topic that's really close to my heart. And the entrepreneurial way in which we support some of the ventures is also quite unique. So it felt like there was a good fit. I thought, join it, see how things go. And I'm still there 7 years later. So no, it's been a great opportunity to have impact on a tremendous scale, on a global scale as well. Because if you can imagine, little old me from Ilford gets to sit on the board of Virgin Unite, where, for example, during the COVID pandemic, we were chartering some of the planes, which is the airline, to be able to get vaccine in country in some of the worst hit areas. For me to be part of the team that's signing off those types of initiatives is a huge privilege, and the impact I can have is tremendous. So I hope I managed to convey the excitement and the benefits of having board roles. I won't bore you further, but definitely I think it's a great opportunity for anybody who's thinking about it. Definitely at least investigate it, because it's a lot easier to get into than you might think, and so much more rewarding as well.
You certainly have exuded that excitement, and
Yes.
by no means was it boring. So thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Natalie, the other topic that we wanted to pack and discuss with you, very, very important topic, which is around diversity. In your journey, one of the themes has been sort of the only one, where you go into rooms and sort of it's obviously that I think you've used that to actually fuel you to move along your career. Yep. What's been your experience around how you see diversity improving, or maybe not, with workspace? And at which levels do you think we're actually seeing progress around diversity? And that obviously means people from sort of representative backgrounds, and also females as well. Are we seeing change, or is it something which is a good discussion that happens in the boardroom?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, on being the only one, yes, as I said, I've often experienced that in some respects, been, not found it quite as daunting, although there's the only one in terms of ethnicity, for example. But, when you're spending an awful lot of time with Oxbridge guys who've been to, boarding school, that's a different type of feeling like the only one, right? So,
yes, of course.
It presents itself in many, many different guises. But what I would say is, particularly when I was running Educate, and we did raise some seed funding from VCs and others, I actually was able to use the only one to my advantage, because often there were predominantly males, if not only men, that were pitching. Many startups are run by men, often the only person of color. And then I would sort of come in, and Educate had this really sort of multicolored logo on our t-shirts, and I used to go on and I would stand out. And because I would stand out, people at least listen to what you have to say. So use the fact that you have their ear to say something really important. So just to put it out there that it can also be something that you can make work for you in certain contexts. But in terms of the landscape, look, when I was at the Windsor Fellowship, I was often going to environments where, there were few, if any, people of color. And now when I look at the progress that many of the partner firms that we work with at SEO London have made over the last a couple of decades of my career, it's just extraordinary. Now, look, much of that is happening at the entry level. So you're seeing much better representation, both in terms of gender as well as in terms of ethnicity. But what we want to do is to see that now translating to progressing through organizations, because it feels, that not at least half the work is still to do. If it's just about getting people in the door and then within 5 or 10 years they're gone, you really want to make sure that they can see themselves as senior leaders of organizations. But a huge amount of progress has been made. And I think there's no question, certainly in the UK. I was also, as I said, studying in France, and it's unfortunate that far less progress has been made out there for a variety of reasons. Yes, there's been progress, and yes, there are opportunities, but I think the hurdle now is how to navigate the hurdle, the challenges that you experience when you're in a career.
Yes.
And again, it's the same themes: not being able to see representation at senior levels, not being able to understand some of the unwritten rules or hurdles or barriers that might be in the way, not having access to those networks, not looking like somebody that they have promoted into a certain role before. So those all exist. But again, that's why the work that we do is so vitally important in SEO.
So maybe, Nathalie, just to double click on the important work that you mentioned, and I think maybe for the listeners, both Pabila and I have mentioned this before, but we are both SEO London alumni as well. Back in 2012, which seems a long time ago, SEO London was the organization that introduced both Pabila and I to a large multinational corporate company, gave us the opportunity to move abroad for the first time for a 3-month internship. And somehow we convinced this company to keep us. And then almost 20 years later, combined, we've had an amazing experience. And that is meant a deep, deep gratitude towards SEO London for the amazing work that they've done. And over the years, both Pabila and I have stayed connected with the community. And we've seen how it's expanded every year, the number of professional partners, etc. But I think it's really worth highlighting, especially since you've come in, Nathalie, into the role as CEO, how the SEO alumni network and the events has really grown. And we've seen also recently how you've expanded into other countries. So please tell us more about SEO London since you've come in, some of the amazing initiatives that you've done, and also the plans for the next few years as well for the listeners.
Yeah.
So, and I think you guys are such good examples of what we're all about and why what we do is so incredibly important. So just in terms of the backstory, we were founded 60 years ago. In fact, last year we celebrated 60-year anniversary in New York, in the US, at the start of the civil rights movement. And our global founder, Michael Osowich, he saw a need to provide opportunities to African-American youth. Remember, at this point, you have segregation in many states, a real distinct lack of opportunity. So it started with an after-school program to help them to dream big, get into some of the top universities in the US. And then that morphed into the careers program, which is where we spend most of our effort. And you guys would have gone through the careers program, which is about taking talented university students, helping them to develop the skills, the experience, focus with, develop the motivation, the self-belief, as well as the tools to be able to get into competitive industries such as finance, law, technology, consulting, etc., helping them to get internships and convert those internships into full-time offers. So we had been doing that for, I think, about 3 decades when one of our alumnus from the US arrived in the UK in the year 2000. And his name is Andrew Fairburn, who I know you've also had on your podcast. And he thought quite rightly that the UK needed what SEO had to offer. So he founded SEO London. And so we have 3 programs. We have our schools program, which is focused on helping school students from the age 15 to 18, all of which are from low-income backgrounds, some of the most disadvantaged backgrounds on the pupil premium, so free school meals, and helping them to be able to improve their grades, have an idea of what careers they might want to do after finishing school and university, get into top universities. So it really is about helping them to again, dream big and think about what they could do and develop those core skills from the point where they're at school. I've talked about the SEO careers program, and then importantly, whichever of those two programs people have been on, they can then join our alumni. And our alumni is where the model has exponential impact, because each person within the alumni is helping the next generation that comes through. And that's the real beauty of the model. If those that we've helped then pay it forward and support the next generation, that's how we scaled from our first cohort of just 7 young people, one of whom is now on our board and is a senior partner at Goldman Sachs, Nishi Samaya. But we went from 7 back in the year 2001, when she finished at SEO London, to about 4,000 young people that we support every year now. So you can see that growth is only possible because of the power of our alumni network. And as I said, you guys are really great examples of that.
Amazing. And this one comment that I'll just mention to the listeners is, if you want any more information, you can go on seolondon.org. But Nathalie has mentioned some of the members that have gone on to amazing careers. But if you look across a lot of these larger organizations, whether it's in banking, consulting, managing directors, CEOs, partners, a lot of these people who came through the SEO London program are now in very strong, influential roles across multiple industries. And that's something that I think we're all proud to be part of. And I think we're also very privileged, Nathalie, that you're leading it as you are for the next generation. So I think on behalf of everyone, just a big thank you to you as well, and to the amazing team that's helping.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, you know, I could take credit for the successes, but honestly, we have a phenomenal team. There are 70 of us now. We have grown massively over the last few years, and particularly with George Floyd, and a lot of conversations about the lack of diversity and opportunity. We've had some very generous and forward-thinking partners who supported our work. In a nutshell, when you said what's coming next, we are launching in France, where we launched last year. I'm incredibly excited to take our model to another European country where there is a lack of access to opportunity. There's a different framework there. People have an aversion to talking about ethnicity or race. But we're focusing on those young people from low-income backgrounds with a program as well for women. And also just making sure that social impact is at the heart of everything we do is incredibly important to us. And being now that we're moving into our 3rd decade, that we are much more analytical about understanding that impact, making sure we're supporting the young people who need us the most, and scaling that. So we're very mindful of the conversations that are happening in the US around affirmative action, around DEI programs. There's definitely a shift in appetite. And, certainly in terms of SEO London, we see the changes that have happened over the last 2-3 decades. And we know there's a lot more work to be done. But also, my personal view is, whatever your political persuasion, to see a prime minister of color is something I did not think would happen at this stage. So, even those who criticize Rishi, for me, it was such a milestone that we had a prime minister who is from an ethnic minority background. So I think increasingly we need to tailor our approach when we see that the country is evolving. He obviously incredibly prestigious boarding school, and so we are making sure that we combine our focus on ethnic representation with really looking at social mobility as well. We think that is where the real battleground is, and making sure that those young people from the most economically disadvantaged backgrounds are well represented amongst those students that we work with, and doing a lot more of that work. So yeah, our mission evolves as the country and the context evolves, and we are always looking to make sure that we're supporting the right young people who need our support the most.
Nathalie, just quickly to tag on that, I'm curious to understand, what does success look like for you with this SEO position, in the sense of, is it the number of students that you try to attract each year? Is it the conversion from internships to full-time positions, or how long students stay within the corporation? What's the sort of metric, if you like, that you really are paying attention to, or look at from a success standpoint?
Great question. And, I'll cop out slightly because there are several metrics. So first of all, for me, it's about impact. There's no point helping, we could help 100,000 kids, but if we've got, next to no impact, then what's the point? So it's got to be about, can we take a young person who perhaps wasn't aware of these types of career paths? Can we take them on a journey where they believe they can do it? They have the tools they need to be able to select an organization that might make sense for them, and confidently succeed in that evaluation process so they can get in through the door and convert to a full-time offer and be successful in their career. And if that's working, then clearly we then want to scale that.
Yeah.
And we get, between about 800 and 900 students who get employment at one or more of the firms that we're supporting on an annual basis. So yes, that's a key metric for us. But then another for me is how many of those are now giving back. Ideally through us, that would be wonderful. They come back as mentors and advocates. But even if they are, some have started social enterprises. We have many of our alumni who have started other SEOs globally in the same way that Andrew did when he started SEO London. So there's so many ways of having impact. But for me, it's those three metrics. How are we doing against our mission of connecting talent with opportunity? How many of those are then getting permanent roles, and then how many of them are giving back to the generations to come?
Natalie, I have a quick question before we go to the quick fire round.
Yes.
And it's the question that everyone on the podcast and all of our listeners, by the time they've got to this point, are waiting to know. Is that finance dream still a dream yet to be lived, or is it all closed?
It's closed. It's closed.
I think
we're onto bigger dreams now, Daniel. That was a past.
I make my contribution to the world of finance by helping the leaders of the finance leaders of tomorrow to find the great firms where they're going to have maximum impact. So that's where I see my role. But I certainly love what I do, and I love the role of chief exec as well. My goodness, to be fortunate enough to lead a team of 70 amazing people to do something that I really care about is a real joy. So no finance for me now, certainly.
Amazing. So, I mean, Natalie, it's been such a great episode, and I think having you on and sharing your diverse experiences and the achievements that you've had, it's been a very inspiring one. I'd recommend to all our listeners to save this episode, make sure to listen back to it, because there's lots of golden nuggets throughout the episode that I've made lots of notes myself. So I hope you have enjoyed the episode as well. And as we always close with all our Take Flight Talk interview episodes, we have a quick fire 5-question round for you, Natalie, and then we'll wrap up the episode. Good to go?
As I'll ever be. Let's do this.
Right, perfect. So question number 1, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Probably if it's meant to be, it will be. Don't like those sorts of expressions, because I think we have so much agency in life and we can make so many great things happen rather than being passive. So yeah, be the agent of change in your life and go for it.
Amazing. And I think that gives us a perfect segue in terms of the best piece of advice that you've received, because I think you've already given one gem just then, but is there anything else that you've been told that you regard as, okay, this is really the best advice, or something you hold dear now?
Yeah, I think probably the best advice I've heard is never let a good crisis go to waste. And I love that expression, because a crisis can actually be an amazing opportunity. And often you'll find that great businesses or great entrepreneurial ideas come from adversity, whether that's personal adversity or a recession or a crisis in some way, because that means a lot of change is happening. And that can often be where you find that nugget that means that you can differentiate yourself. So yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste.
I personally like that one. I personally like that one, Natalie, because crisis in Japanese and kanji means opportunity and danger.
Love it. I did not know that, but that's I love it even more now.
Perfect. So then the third question, Natalie, is a piece of content that you're loving at the moment. So it can be a book, can be digital media, a movie, etc.
I'm loving at the moment. Do you know what? Trivially, it's a bit corny, but I love Squid Game. I don't know if you guys have seen it, and I cannot wait for the second series. I just thought it was so creative, different. I love the fact that it was a South Korean drama, and a lot of the personal stories really resonated. I don't know if that was the sort of thing you're looking for, but I do. I've just thought it was a superb series. I can't wait for series 2.
Have you seen the reality version of that?
I did.
It's not quite the same.
It
Yeah.
was well done, but I want the drama. I want to hear what I want to see what happened to the detective. I'm waiting for the series to come out.
The drama in the reality show is the winner not receiving their money yet. I mean, that's the
Oh wow.
that's the biggest drama there.
But for any of our listeners, I mean, a lot of people have watched this show. It was a smash hit. But in case you haven't, then you can find it on Netflix, and we can all highly recommend it. It was a smash hit from South Korea. The penultimate question for you, Nathalie, is something that you're curious at the moment to learn more about.
Yeah, you know what? I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can about the legal frameworks in the US. I know it probably sounds dull to some, but just with respect to the conversations around affirmative action and DEI. And I won't bore you with your penultimate question, but there's so much movement in that space. And I like to think that there's a middle ground, or there's a pragmatic way of not undoing some of the positive work that has been happening about really creating opportunities for those who need them, but also appreciating that the world changes, and when that happens, you have to change your approach as well. So I am trying to get into a lot of the case law that's happening and really follow that with interest. But I sincerely hope that, you know, there will continue to be a focus on DEI, because for me, it's a synonym for fairness and opportunity for those who don't have it. So I think there's a way that we can do that without anybody feeling that they're under fire or they're being deprived of opportunities themselves.
Very important topic, especially in the climate that we see ourselves in at the moment as well. And then the final question for you for this evening: what does take flight mean to you?
Yeah, look. I think it's so consistent with what we do at SEO. So SEO is about connecting talent with opportunity, and when you do that talent takes flight, right? They're able to achieve their dreams. They're able to soar to heights that they probably never thought were possible. And that's not just about them as an individual. It's about what they can do for their community and for others who follow them. So for me, it's a wonderful opportunity just to take a person, a group, a community, to the very extent of their potential. So yeah, and when you're up there, you can see things you never could possibly have dreamed.
Amazing, Nathalie. I mean, thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Daniel to wrap up. I think on behalf of everyone, a very, very heartfelt thank you for your time today and for the work that you're doing.
Yes. Nathalie, as they'll say in Italiano, grazie mille, or en français, merci beaucoup. So yes, for those who aren't fluent in Italian, I'll say thank you very much, or in French, thank you very much. So Nathalie, on behalf of us all, we really appreciate you spending your time with us, sharing some really insightful nuggets on your journey, and just more about you and your background and where you've come from and what you're doing now. And we can't wait to see you evolve even to greater heights. And look forward to seeing what the next 5 to 10 years will do, as well as longer. So thank you all. Thank you from us all for being on the podcast. But for our listeners, for those who want to find out more, to connect with you, have you got any sort of website handles or anything that you can share that's public?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. And grazie mille anche a te.
De niente.
Merci beaucoup. Je t'en prie. So, I'll drop in a little bit so you know I wasn't making up the language skills. And no, it's been a real pleasure to have this conversation with you guys. I hope your listeners have found it helpful, and how wonderful again to have two of our esteemed alumni, who are also key parts of your team, which is wonderful. And yes, so we're available at www.seo-london.org. We do please implore you to tell as many of your friends, families, connections as possible about what we do. We don't like to spend huge amounts on marketing. We want to spend that on the young people we support. So we depend on those who know about our work to let people know, and they can just go to our website and find out about the different programs and opportunities that we have available. And then we're also always on the social media that you would expect, be it Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, I believe, as well. So yes, do reach out. And if you're also watching and you are from one of the firms out there that feels that you want to help the next generation, there are a number of different ways you can support as volunteers or sponsors. So please Also, do get in touch with us. We only exist because of the very generous support of our partner firms and, of course, our wonderful alumni. So please do get in touch if you'd like to help in some way.
So to all of our listeners, you've heard it. So thank you for joining us on this episode. We hope you're well, stay safe, and see you next week for another episode of Take Flight Podcast. God bless.
Take off, take